How you doing, guys? It's Ronin back again. We're going to talk about what exactly happens if the House and the Senate go back to the Democrats. What exactly will this landscape of political satire at best look like if the House is flipped by the Democrats, the House and the Senate? That's the question, because the remaining reality is this: as soon as the House is flipped and the Senate is in control of the Democrats, we are going to see a mass exodus of a lot of Republicans, because who gets impeached first? That's the question I'm asking. How many people do you think are going to stick around to see what's going to be impeached? Because the question still remains. Thanks for coming in. When you're looking at a situation of the Democrats taking control of the House and the Senate, do you honestly think that Trump's going to stick around and wait around to see if he's going to be impeached or not, or do you think he's going to run out the middle of the night to a country that won't extradite? Because all I can see is that there is no way that guy could possibly think that he's going to survive in any way, shape, or form after he's impeached, because he still has charges in Georgia. He still has charges in New York. There are still things that he could be charged with because of January 6th. Remember, Jack Smith didn't, go after him and lose. The case wasn't moved forward because of the climate of the politics at the time. But now everyone's going to come out of the woodwork, and if even 10% of the files are true, he's looking at prison time for just all of it. And at his age, 5 or 6 years would be almost a death sentence, and that's like the minimum that he could get. So a 10 to 20-year life sentence for the stuff that he's done would be life. There's no question about it. But do you honestly think that he would stick around? Because as far as I'm concerned, when the House and the Senate are taken by the Democrats, the Tangerine Twat Waffle and that Oval Circus will disappear like a virgin on prom night. He will find a way to get out of the country and go somewhere where no one will touch him. My guess, Russia, maybe? I don't know. But what we do know is that there is no question that he would never stand trial. He would never be impeached. And there's no chance what exactly do you think this country is going to look like for the next 3 to 6 months once the House and the Senate are taken by Democrats? Because I'm theorizing that it's going to be impeachment hearing after impeachment hearing after impeachment hearing. So the question remains is that who do you think, or who would you want to be impeached first? I'm just wondering, because I'm going to assume it's J.D. Vance right off the bat, because nobody wants him to be in office in the first place. And then it's going to be Kristi Noem, or a tie between Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi. One way or the other, you're not just thinking about the cabinet, but how many other people that aren't a part of the cabinet in Congress that are going to get impeached once they find out their connections to the Epstein files? Because one way or the other, as soon as he's removed from office, those files are going to get cracked open on a level that we haven't seen. And those extra 3.5 million files that we haven't seen yet, what is those going to actually relieve or show? Because I can tell you right now, as it stands, if what we've gotten so far is this bad, could you imagine what they're holding back? Because here's the deal. There was terabytes of information at the Epstein estate when it comes to video surveillance and camera systems. They had full camera systems in all of his properties, whether it was in New York with that brownstone in New York, if it was in New Mexico, or if it was in Florida. These were 3 major camps that had tons of video surveillance cameras. They were taking out videotapes, old pictures, the whole bit, and we've only seen a fraction of any of that. This guy's been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. You're telling me how many pictures could he possibly have just on hard copy? And then the terabytes of videotape that he had, because apparently he was blackmailing everybody. It doesn't make much sense. But the reality is that what does this country look like after the House and the Senate are taken back in control? Do Democrats actually live up to their our expectations and drive this home and get rid of everybody that was possibly affiliated or touched by these files? Who knows? What I do know is that you just saw Les Wexman be deposed by the Democrats of the House Oversight Committee, and not one single Republican showed up. Not one of them decided that they were going to go and ask questions of this witness, who is allegedly a co-conspirator, somebody that they've actually seen as being complicit in the actions taken and done by Epstein. Yet somehow not one Republican wanted to be there. Not one Republican wanted to ask him questions. But yet those same Republicans that didn't show up for today's deposition are the same ones crying that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton don't want to do it behind closed doors. It's funny because if they do it behind closed doors, they could edit, they can manipulate, they can actually cut down the information that's spoken within the hearing out to the American people. But if they actually did it out loud and had everybody watch it in real time, then there's no manipulating. There's no, editing out or cutting out the information, and that's the problem. Right now, everything is so convoluted with spin, and you don't know if this is AI, and you don't know if this is actually real because is that AI generated or is that true or is those photoshopped or cuts? That this whole world is in spin mode, and the people that have the highest level of access to tech and all of this, what are they doing? They're using that to generate false ideas, false narratives, false things going on around the world. And so that's all being done. So people are having a hard time actually knowing what the truth is. So it's not a shock that so many people fell in love with Trump and voted him into office. Those aren't the people that you should be upset with. It's not the 77 million Americans that voted for him, allegedly. I don't know if it's really 77 million. I think it's a lot less, but the voter fraud thing we can leave as a conspiracy theory for another time. But what I do know is that those people aren't to blame. And the people that voted for Harris, they're not to blame either. It's the 100 million people that could vote that didn't bother getting off their butt and actually voting. And that's the reason why they want the voter polls and the voter information and the vital statistics, because they want to try to steal the midterms. And I'm coming back to the original point, so just give me a second. That's why they want all of the voter information. They're not looking to target the people that voted for blue or voted for red. They want the non-voters, because if they can steal their vote in some way, whether it's directly campaigning to them and bribing them to vote, or if it's simply they're going to take the information and use the computer to manipulate it, one way or the other, they want that master list of people that don't vote, don't go out and actually make their voice heard, have not bothered exercising their civil liberties by voting for an elect. So they want to take those people and use their vote to count where it needs, because they're afraid they're going to lose. Because the reality is that when these midterms happen, if they happen, he's cooked. He's on the first plane out of the country, and he'll never come back. He'll either do an Epstein in the holding cell, or he's going to disappear. And that's the reality of it is that you think Trump is going to stand trial for any of this? Do you think he'll stand up and make his, and fight this? No, he's going to take off. Why do I know this? Because he didn't even have the nerve to serve his country. He deferred, wow, just totally drew a blank. He deferred his enlistment into the military 5 times. He dodged the draft 5 separate times. And now all of a sudden you think he's going to stand trial for any of this? He's literally negated everything. That the level of fraud, the level of what he's done is beyond impeachable. But the fact that he has all of this stuff that's alleged in the Epstein files, and that the FBI has actually got credible, because now they've actually found 302s to match with some of the things. And there was a report where some FBI agents actually found credible information to actually implicate Trump, but yet that didn't go anywhere. There's so much cover up that they're uncovering, but yet you think that he's going to stand trial for any of it. And here's the other thing. I keep saying that if they have the midterms, and I know there are people who are just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Midterms are going to happen. There's law. There's case law. We have midterms. We're going to have it. Really? Well, guess what? There's a lot of things in the Constitution and the laws of this land that he wasn't supposed to do, and he violated it. And he's taken and he's enriched his family. There's so many things that he's done that he wasn't supposed to do, but he did it anyway. That why don't you ask the Kennedy family whether or not he was allowed to put his name on that building? Because regardless of what anyone says, Congress was the only one that was actually allowed to make that decision. And since Congress didn't have the stones to take his name off as fast as he put it on, I don't even think Congress is going to step up and do anything. I think that it's going to have to be a red-handed, absolute nowhere point. It's going to have to be a situation where the Democrats take control and then you'll actually see something, because the Republicans are willfully ignorant or completely complicit. Because I still don't understand how Pam Bondi could have actually sat there and not talked to the victims. Because in case you didn't realize, she sat on Capitol Hill talking to the House Oversight Committee like as if they were somehow working for her. And on top of it, when they asked her to turn around and look behind her and actually apologize for releasing the information, she didn't have the balls to. Not even a little bit. She just absolutely, the reality of it is simple. This country needs a major overhaul. We need complete and absolute rooting out of the system. And until you get that, this is what we have. Because here's the problem: if you think that impeaching Trump or JD Vance is somehow going to right this ship, realize this: the rest of the world has now seen just how crooked this country can be, because they are watching you guys try to overcome or deny or refuse the fact that these this case existed. So the rest of the world is seeing that not only is Trump complicit in all of this, but he's also in a situation where the rest of the world is watching that your Congress, your government agents, people within high-ranking lists are allowing it to happen. So do you think the rest of the world is actually going to be that trusting or that interested in actually hearing from the United States for a while? Or do you think that now that this corruption has come out and you're seeing just how deep and wide it is, do you think that the rest of the world is going to trust the United States? Honestly, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, but the reality of it is that I don't see that happening. I don't see this country going back to status quo just once you get rid of him, because he's revealed a lot of crookedness and a lot of evilness that this country is allowed to exist for so long. I mean, the Epstein files have been on file for how long? And yet they're only coming to light now. And that's not just attacking Republicans, that's looking at the Democrats as well. You all had this information for at least almost a full decade, and you're telling me that nobody wanted to like bring this to light sooner? Okay? There wasn't anybody in this country that actually found what was going on necessary to actually stand up and fight against it. Why is it that we have sat here and watched this country be complicit in all of this, and yet somehow you think the rest of the world is just going to be like, okay, not a problem, we'll do business with you again? I think we're looking at a total overhaul of our system, and I think that it's going to take a long, long time for us to regain the trust of all of these other countries. You've got 15 countries right now opening up investigations to see how far and deep Epstein's tentacles went. The reality of it is that what happens if they find out that the CIA knew, or some of these special groups knew exactly what was going on and was allowing it to happen because they were gaining intel on their people? There might be a huge gap in trust in the whole world, just because of the fact of, wow, the United States knew about this. Because why haven't we heard about that? Why haven't we heard about the fact that we've heard about Mossad, right? We've heard about foreign agencies, this, that, and the other. But what about the CIA? Because don't tell me the CIA or one of these other agencies haven't been keeping track of him, because even if they're not taking track of him in the United States, he's in the Virgin Islands and he does a lot of business in other countries like Russia. Because if you didn't know, Epstein had banks in Russia. He also had banks across all of Europe. So the question remains, is that somehow, some way, the CIA didn't know what was going on? They didn't pick up chatter of some sort. Somebody that they were dealing with was dealing with him. Again, that's why I had put a post on my page that said, I don't believe for a second that Epstein is the ringleader of it complete. I think that there was a multitude of people in this, and that there was more than just one figurehead dealing with all this. He was one captured because he was the face of the operation, or at least a big part of it, and so he got nailed. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't other people that were facilitating this, and that's a big question that nobody wants to answer. Because do you honestly think that this ring fell just because he, supposedly unalived himself? It doesn't make much sense. But again, going back to the original reason for this live was to go over the fact that I don't see this country just snapping back into, normalhood again. I think that between our economic issues, the partnerships that have been, stretched, the fact that a lot of the people that our allies that we did business with are gonna, now that they found other places to get information or get stuff from, they might not be coming back to us as fast. And the reality of it all is that for the next 6 months to a year, we'll be so bogged down with, you know, impeachment hearings and treason cases and this, that, and the other, rooting out all of this, that if this country was really serious about rooting out the problems of this country, we are looking at a very long time before this country ever comes back to where it was or it appeared to be, because it's losing popularity and credibility across the board. And the fact that this government is allowing this cover up to continue on is probably raising a lot of doubt with a lot of foreign countries. But like, this is the kind of country that we're doing business with. Think about it. I mean, it's one thing to be crooked or be, depraved in certain levels of whatever, but this is a group of individuals that are supposed to be ethical and moral and of justice, protecting a ring of PDF files. How do you think other countries look? How every other country has been proactive immediately as they're getting the files, they're doing research, they're opening up investigations, they are trying to, root this out because this is, corruption and problems. But yet the only country not doing anything is the United States. And you don't think that that's a cause of concern for people around the world? You don't think there are people wondering, like, why isn't the United States, doing this? They don't. I mean, it's bad enough that it's clear that that this country doesn't protect children when they go to school every day. Why is it that this country has billions of dollars to lock immigrants in cages, but yet doesn't have enough money to make sure kids can have free lunch at school every day? That's, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of life that we're dealing with right now. We have billions of dollars to lock immigrants up in cages who were paying taxes, that were living their life, they were trying to become citizens of the United States, but yet you don't have any money to make sure that kids don't go hungry, at home, or that kids don't have, don't have a roof over their head. Because the reality of it is, this country spends so much money on policing people, locking people up in cages, and treating everyone like criminals, that where's the freedom? Where's the democracy here? And the reality of it is that it seems like the people that are the most crooked are the ones that are actually imposing the harshest rules on everything. Because this White House, this Oval Office, this administration in its cabinet entirety are a bunch of criminals that are inflicting harm and pain on the people of this country. And yet somehow, some way, right, we're watching them inflict all of this pain. Meanwhile, they're the ones that are the actual felons. They're the ones that are committing crimes against humanity. They're the ones that have got such horrific past that if their secrets were let out, they'd be locked up in prison or disbarred or taken, kicked out of the country. And this is all okay. So again, like I says, when the Democrats take back the House and the Senate, and I say if they do, because honestly, I don't see this president actually letting go of anything. I think he will stop the midterms. I think he will find a way to filibuster, so to speak, and stop the Democrats from taking control of the House and the Senate. And I think that we will be stuck with him dealing with this, because if he doesn't do something, he'll go to prison. What would you do to stay out of prison? What would you do to make sure that you don't spend the rest of your life in prison and you don't have anywhere near the power he's got? So what does he think he's going to do? This is the guy who's trying to get the taxpayers of this country to pay him $10 billion because his tax returns were, leaked. You know what I mean? He wants $10 billion, and he's going to get it because the people that make the decision are him and his cabinet that all do exactly what he says. So you don't think he's going to get that $10 billion? And he claims he'll give it to charity. I'd love to see the receipts on that. Yet this guy is the guy who's got his finger on the button. This is the guy who basically has got all of our lives in his hand. And do you think that he's going to relinquish that power even if somehow the Democrats get enough votes? Do you think he's actually going to allow a midterm elections that's going to take that power away because he knows if he loses that power, he goes to prison? He will do anything to stay out of prison. Absolutely. There's no question about it. The argument can't even be made, because the reality of it is that you can't judge or criticize anybody for what they would do to stay out of harm's way. It just, you know what I'm saying? The joke is, oh, if the airplane is going down, save the children first, screw the children, whatever it is, because you're all dying. But people's fight or flight, they're going to take care of themselves first. It's just the way it is. This guy, if the midterms happen, he'll be on a plane that night out of the country because he realizes that they're going to come for him. There's no question about it. I mean, the firing is going to be Mike Johnson fired right away. I've made a video about it saying that if they're going to get rid of Mike Johnson, you really want to see change, put Harris as the VP, right? Because once Vance is removed as vice president, she can become president, and then considering she got 75 million votes at the last election, she would be the next person up. That's an argument for another time. The reality of it is, this guy is going to do everything he possibly can to stay out of jail. There is no question that he's going to use every bit of the leverage he's got. And here's the deal: the reason why the files have stayed sealed is to protect him, yes, but that's in part. The other part is because he's got the juicy information about everybody that's in those files. He's got the extra great crisp, the cream of the crop. He's been using those files as leverage ever since he got into office. That is the reason why Supreme Court justices are folding into his lap. That's the reason why courts are overruling things. That's the reason why he's got Congress people changing their votes or voting in his favor that, despite all, probably would not normally do it. The level of corruption, the level of influence that he's got by having those files in his hand and behind lock and key is the reason why he's still in office. And when the House and the Senate, if they get switched to the Democrats and he loses that list, or if they're able to unredact that list and all of these people's names come falling out, he loses the power that he has, and then he'll be out. Thank you very much, my world. Yeah, and then what about all the Republican donors? And that's another thing. And some of these Republicans that are in the files, they might not be in the files because, the Republican senators and this are in the files because they're doing something nefarious, but they could be using the people that are in the files, and so that ties them into the files. You know what I'm saying? Like, so let's just say donor X is a billionaire that owns X, and you're working with him and getting donations from him, and he's using those donations to control that senator, which I can't imagine that would ever happen. Then they could be in the files. But here's the thing: what happens if the donors that have been paying this Republican PAC for all of this time all are in those files? Now all of a sudden the Republicans won't have the cash register that they used to have. They won't have the piggy bank because a lot of those billionaires that are spending all of that money have been doing so to keep the files secret, to keep all of their secrets secret. So what happens when all of those donors are exposed? Yes, we need to win the midterms, but the reality of it is that the likelihood of the midterms happening all is hingent on the pact of you thinking that he's going to relinquish power. Because again, I don't see it. But if he does anybody want to tell me what their first thought is about, who they would want to impeach first? Because that's going to be the next question. I think it would have to be Vance right away. So that way there's no shenanigans, there's no nothing. He gets impeached first, so that way he can't pardon Trump or pardon anybody else. And here's another question, and this is more of a thought process. Maybe we have to look back at this, but if Trump is kicked out of office for corruption and he's tried, convicted, and removed for treason, even if he's not in the country because he flees, like I think he will, if he's tried and convicted, and will all the pardons that he put into office while he was in office, will those pardons be reversed? In other words, if anything that he pardoned was in place, would it be undone because of the fact of how his presidency ended? That's a really good question. I would love to figure that one out. If anyone has an idea, let me know in the comments, or check out some of my other stuff, because that's something I'm going to research. But the truth of the matter is that if he's out and gone, can any of his pardons stand up and be accepted as valid? That's a really good question. I know that they tried to undo Biden's pardons, but here's the deal: he wasn't impeached and removed from office for violating the ethics of the office. So I'm just wondering, does it make everything that he did null and void if they're gonna if they impeach him? But it still doesn't change the fact that, like I says, we need the midterms. But as I said before, do you think he's gonna validate or even accept the midterm election results? Even if you had the elections and, "Hey, we took the House," do you think he's going to allow it, or do you think it's gonna be lawsuit city where they're gonna have to fight in court to get it validated? Because there's another thing, even if they come up with the votes and they get everything in, could he just reject it, deny it, and tie up the court? Oh my god. Okay, I know I've only got 7 people in here, but here's the deal. What's to stop him from filing a lawsuit against the results, questioning and debating whether or not the results are valid and that the it's in whatever that. And what happens if he gets it tied up in court for forever how long? There's the end game. Even if the states have their elections, right? Let's just say the states have their elections, they come back, they all win as they think they're going to win. Those votes, those results have to be validated by somebody. Now, the vice president usually is the one that announces the new president elect into office and says, "Hey, this is the new president that's going to be on." What happens if they just refuse to acknowledge or accept those results? They just will put it into lawsuits and keep those results from being validated for as long as possible because the courts they can just delay inevitably in court. I'm just wondering because that would be a huge upset, and I'm wondering now. I've definitely got another research to do, and so I apologize. I'm kind of ranting here as we're going on. But what happens if that's the case? What happens if they try to unhinge those results by law, suing them and having the Supreme Court overturn it? It's definitely a question. I'd love to hear what anybody has to say about it, but he's sued so much. I mean, think about it. He spent $1 billion this 1 year alone in lawsuits. If you think about all the lawsuits that he's had just in this 1 year, fighting and back and forth and appeals and this, how much money is it? I mean, because every state he's had lawsuits in every state. Every state has filed lawsuits against this guy. It has to be close to $1 billion because if you think about how many lawsuits that have been, how much those lawsuits would be, how much it costs to appeal those lawsuits. You know what I'm saying? You're talking what for every civil action lawsuit, it's about $10,000. Start adding that up, and then adding the appeals, and then if you bring it to Supreme Court, there's a fee there. This is all taxpayer money. I'm just wondering what it's going to be. And I would like to thank everybody. I don't have a lot of lives. I will let you know that I've been planning on doing lives more regularly, maybe 6, 7 o'clock every night, Monday through Friday, trying to build my footing, so to speak. If you like what I've been doing, if you have any comments, I'd love to hear from you guys. If you want to pound the screen, give me a couple of hearts. If you think, I'm on the right trail, I'd really appreciate it. Some feedback, even if it's bad feedback, I accept it all. And if you like what I'm talking about, I hope you're going to subscribe. Thanks for the heart. If you want to subscribe, it's free. If you want to check out some of the videos I try to do at least 1 or 2 videos a day. I'm not really long. I mean, I'm long-winded now. I've been on here for like almost a half hour, but typically my videos are 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not really looking to bore the hell out of somebody by long-winding it. I feel like we should get information as fast as possible. Maybe that's from my TikTok days, so I feel a need to be quick about it. But I do appreciate everybody that takes the time to watch this and give me a like or a follow. But like I says, I don't see the midterms happening. To be honest, I'm just going to segue back. I don't see the midterms happening. I think that even if the midterms happen on a state level, I don't think that the country is going or the federal government is going to recognize them, and they're going to try to sue their way out of the situation. Now, granted, it's going to take a long time, but I think that it's going to be a delay in justice. I think it's going to be a delay in taking control of the House and the Senate, and I think that it's going to be ultimately, regardless of the stack of law that people are probably writhing and arguing with me right now, but the reality of it is this, is that he's had the law against him on so many things. He's had the Constitution. He's violated. There's things that he's just ignoring it. He's just ignoring things like as if it's, you know what? Yeah. I mean, he's taking it like as if everything that he's read in these law books, like he's read any of those law books, he's just taking them as cautionary tales. He's taking every single tradition and just saying, nah, I don't feel like doing that. I mean, he didn't even put his hand on the Bible when he was sworn in at the inauguration. You know what I mean? Like that's the type of person that we're dealing with. I mean, he's not supposed to enrich his family or himself while he's in office, but he's done that. I mean, he's not supposed to take bribes or take gifts from foreign dignitaries, but he's done that. He's taking a $400 million plane, he's rebooting it and it's gonna go into his presidential library. And when he's done with being president, he'll get to keep that and use that plane on taxpayer dollars for the rest of his days. And that's somebody who we are alleging is a PDF file or at least a PDF file protector. And yet that's the guy who's basically grifting us into Stonehenge. We're sitting here watching people think that immigrants or undocumented immigrants are the problem and the reason why we're all poor, but yet it's the billionaires who've set the pay scales. It's the billionaires who chose to hire those immigrants over US citizens time and again because they're looking at their profit, not their actual people that they got working for them. They've chosen profit over people, and yet you're surprised somehow. It's funny to me sometimes to think about just how people are blaming the wrong minority. You're blaming the immigrants of this country for what's going on, but yet they've got no power, they've got no ability to vote, and they've got no legislation or lobbyists in their back pockets. And you're telling me that you think they're the problem. You think immigrants, there are people that think immigrants are the problem, that undocumented immigrants are the issue, but meanwhile, none of them are in the Epstein files, okay? They're not the ones using their power, and their prestige to block justice. They're not the ones blocking sanctions that would actually require that, manufacturing companies in this country have to manufacture in this country. They can't keep sending it off to other countries to do it for, a quarter of the price. But yet you're still looking at the immigrants, the undocumented, the ones with no power, no control, no vote, and you're saying that they're the ones that have got that they're the problem. But yet the ones that have actually screwed you over or got you so ass over end with your house right now because of property values tanking, they're the ones you're idolizing and accepting. Um Favor Bean said that he has ignored 90 court orders in regards to ICE and immigration. Yes, this administration not only has ignored court orders, but blatantly said that judges are ignorant or stupid. He's at Christy Nome herself said about a judge, he's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. She said that to a judge, but yet nothing's happened to her. You know what I mean? She needed two brand new planes to jet around everywhere, and she's calling judges idiots. She's doing all of these photo shoots and photo ops and everything like that on taxpayer dollars, and she really just looks like a skeleton that had, skin wrapped around on it, like something like this. I'm like, does she really have a heart, or do you think she has one of those like Build-A-Bear hearts that she just puts in there, and when people squeeze her, they can hear her heartbeat? I'm just wondering because that woman is vapid of any type of moral judgment. I'm telling you right now, the only person that's ever going to love that woman is the immigrant that's going to dig her grave when she finally passes away. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the Supreme Court, his Supreme Court, ruled against him a year ago and said that all people on this ground, on this earth, that are in the United States have a right to due process. That citizenship has nothing to do with it. Yet somehow, some way, they've ignored that. They've ignored his wherever he is. And then on top of it, this is the same president who refused to actually follow the court orders that said that he had to release the funds to SNAP benefits so that, the 42 million Americans that relied on those food assistance could get it, even though Congress had already allocated that money in efforts or concerns that the government shutdown would last too long. Congress had a provision to make sure that money was allocated, yet he denied that and he refused to release it. And he had his minion at the food and at agriculture hold the funds. Didn't care. He even said on True Social that I'm not paying that money until the Democrats concede and stop this government shutdown. He openly refused it, and then they had to go to court and say, well, that's what Trump said in the Truth Social, but he's really complying and really wants to do it. These are the things that he does on a regular basis, and yet you still think that he's not going to like just deny the midterms, that he's just going to allow himself to be put into a situation of being prosecuted. I mean, I can't believe that he gave the attorney that got him convicted with 34 felonies the deputy general position. Like I can't even imagine that. How would you sit there and be convicted of 34 felonies and look at that attorney and go, by the way, I'm giving you a promotion? And Blanche had the audacity to say that partying with Epstein wasn't a crime. Yes, it is. When suckling children or infants is what you're enjoying at your parties, then yes, it's a crime. When you know for a fact that majority of the time he has underage girls at almost every single party, and they're not supposed to be there, and they're doing things that they're not supposed to be doing until they're much older, and have decided to whatever, that's a crime. Okay, and the fact that all of these Republicans keep trying to use the word like, young women or, underage instead of saying children. You know what I mean? Because these are children. These are kids, 9 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. These are children being abused. And the Republicans keep trying to use young women or, like all of these terminologies to try to like get around the fact that we're talking about Republicans are defending people that are touching children. It doesn't make much sense to me in the least bit. But yet you think that guy that was willing to do those type of things to children or the whole, eating kids and all of that stuff, you think that guy is going to somehow allow democracy to have its day if it means him going to prison for the rest of his life? Give me a break, honestly. He is absolutely the most vile individual. Listen, do you know how bad Trump is? Jeffrey Epstein said in an email more than once, than one person, that he thought that Trump was the most vile human being he'd ever seen in his life. Could you imagine how bad of a person you've got to be when Jeffrey Epstein has got the moral high ground on a person's integrity or class? I mean, think about that. Jeffrey Epstein, the guy who basically did all of these trafficking, horrible, horrific things, selling people, this, that, all of the horrific things that Jeffrey Epstein's done. Think about how horrible of a person Jeffrey Epstein is. And yet somehow, some way, he said that he thought that Trump was the worst human being that he'd ever met in his life. And I'm pretty sure he has mirrors in his house. So there's not any way that he can even deny the fact that he's looked himself in the face and still thought that Trump was worse than him. You know what I mean? Like how bad of a person do you got to be when the devil says, "Yeah, I don't really want to hang out with you." Like, because that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at a situation where you've got the worst of the worst, the most vile human being doing the most horrific things possible, and yet somehow he goes, "Nah, I'm good. He's horrible." And how much of a freak does Elon Musk have to be? How horrible of a person do you think Elon Musk is when Jeffrey Epstein didn't want to hang out with him? Because he kept asking to come to the island. Can I come to the island? Can I come to the island? Like Elon Musk was like, a dog on meth or something. Like, can I? And Elon and you can see Epstein constantly, shutting him down. So how bad does that have to be? So even Elon Musk, even Epstein didn't want Elon Musk's money. Like, wow, that's saying something. Or maybe in hindsight, maybe Elon Musk just wasn't worth as much money back then. Maybe we got to figure that out. Maybe that's what it was, is that he was new money and it wasn't enough money for Epstein to want to bring him into the circle. I don't know, but either way, Epstein looking at Trump going, he's the worst human being I've ever seen in my life, should really tell you something. Like, wow, Epstein didn't think much of Trump. So anyway, sorry, I digressed. I apologize. And then you got all these other people that are, claiming that they had, low thoughts of Epstein, but meanwhile they're going to the island all of the time. I'm sorry, but there is no question that that island had a lot more involved, and I think that Epstein had a lot more people helping him in his ring, and it wasn't just one person. He wasn't trafficking all these people to himself. So the fact that you charged Epstein with trafficking, but yet don't charge him charge anybody else for anything else. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Who did he traffic these people to? You know what I mean? Like, it's just stupid. And I've heard this rumor 100 times. So let me just figure something out for you. Yes, Epstein had his island. Yes, Trump had his house down in St. Martin. It just so we're clear, by boat, it's a 3.5 hour boat trip on water from his island to Donald Trump's property that he had at the time. So it's like a 4 hour boat trip. I don't see them taking people by boat, to his island. So just stop that. I've already done the math. It's like 3.5 hours, 4 hours on the water. No boat is going to do that. There was much better ways they could do it. They helicopter pads, because I can tell you right now, the St. Martin area patrols didn't have an issue with people you just landing their helicopters, and his land was big enough to be able to take a dry land. In other words, like, people could pop in, drop someone off, and leave as long as the helicopters don't stay on the land. As long as they're just dropping off and going, there was never any issues. A lot of times they would get a fine, or they would be paying into something. This is the stuff that I've read. So, a helicopter ride over or a plane ride over was possible. But I don't even know. I have to look and see if a helicopter could actually fly for how fast of a helicopter ride it would have been. But by boat, it's 4 hours. So the idea that they were boat riding people back and forth from the island to, Trump's property, not likely, but not out of hand, but not likely. And here's the other thing. With everything that Trump has done during his stay at the White House, realize this: he still had allegations and charges that he was supposed to be facing before he actually went into the presidency. Like, Georgia had allegations and a case against him. New York had another case against him. He had a few things going on that there were still, cases being brought against him when he went into office. The only reason why Jack Smith stopped and didn't actually, bring the January 6th and the documents case against him for how he handled everything in Mar-a-Lago wasn't because he didn't have enough evidence. He even said in his last statement at Congress Oversight Committee hearing that he just had, I didn't see how I could prosecute him while he was a seated president. So the charges could still be brought forward. There is such a thing as called tolling, where just because you're out of country or out of state, all of that time that you spent out of country or unavailable like this, you could be still the time. So the time, expectancy on that could be extended, and say, well, the statute of limitations could be extended because of tolling. You can look it up. You'll find out what I'm talking about. So Trump still has those charges or allegations that are still pending that could go against him. Will it? Who knows? But what we do know is that there's still allegations there just before all that. Then you add on top of it everything that's been going on while he's been president, the fact that he's got a meme coin that you've been using and back funneling money. There's no question about it. He opened up that meme coin 2 days before he became president of the United States, and it's got liquidity. It has had massive amounts of money dumped into it over the whole period of time. And then he had these banquet dinners at the White House for his investors of the meme coin. And they also, basically, that was like $100,000 price tag or some crap like that to go to this thing. But yet they still got to go it. And it was donated into the meme coin. Like, I mean, come on. This is boilerplate, profiting off of it. Then there's the allegations of all the things that he's been doing while he's been in office. If it doesn't mount to treason, it certainly mounts to kicking him out. And then you've got all of the things that are alleged in the Epstein files. And if there's any way of tying him to any of that, I mean, here's another big thing. They still have 3 million files that haven't been released. They haven't released any of the banking transfers or wire transfers or banking statements or banking information. Could you imagine what's on those files? Because that's where you're going to really get to see whether or not there's an actual ring that's still active or not. Because I've heard reports where they're saying there's still money being transferred out of Epstein estate, to different things. Like, why? Why are there still is there still payments being made into to the Epstein estate? And why is it? It can't just all be investments that are, keep going forward. But here we are. So that would tell you whether or not the ring is fallen or not. Where are those bank accounts? How are those banks? It's going to be a spider web once those, people start following the money, that's when you're really going to see whether or not this ring is gone or not. And I don't think that Epstein gone was the death of the ring. I think that the ring was taken up, and I think it was continued on. I think there was a number two. There had to be someone else involved in all of this, whether it was, the Tangerine Twat Waffle and the Oval Circus. As I learned more into it, did he have the brain power to do it? Did he have the brain power to be funding this? I mean, he did generate a lot of farmland for Epstein's ring. Think about it. I mean, he owned casinos, he owned pageants, modeling agencies, beauty contests, Teen USA, Miss USA, all of these things that promotes young women coming into and girls, contests and this, that, and the other. And this guy was right there in the middle of all of it. This is all of the things that Epstein could use, and then Epstein would use his blackmail and push points to get people to do what he wants. And you think that he had all of that at his disposal and that he would off himself? Come on. There's no reason why Epstein would end himself when he had all of this information and he knew where all the bodies were buried. He knew where all of the information was. And you're telling me that he didn't have a plan? Come on. There's no way. He would have used that information. I think that he just didn't think that anybody would get to him. I think that he was ill prepared. He got caught off guard, got sloppy, and someone made sure that he never spoke. That's it. There's no question about it, because somebody with that much blackmail information, I mean, look at P Diddy, look at Sean Combs as an example. That guy had dirt on everybody, and he probably was a lot smarter, had a lot more street cred, and knew exactly what to do, and he had fail safes, and he had ways to make sure that the information, that if he, like a dead stop, if something happens to me, this stuff will be released. Maybe Epstein just that didn't have that thought process. Maybe he thought because he was the blackmailer of blackmailers